Hello and welcome to Get Well Soon, the show where everyday teenagers just like you discuss and learn about how to achieve your personal and academic goals while taking care of yourself mentally and physically. I'm Liam.
I'm Cafe.
And I'm Dale.
And today we are joined with our school counselor, Mrs. Brown.
Thank you for having me.
So today we're going to talk about social media. And I'd like to start off with just a general question. What is social media? How is it ingrained into our society and what does it look like today?
So to start off, I'd say social media is primarily where anybody like around the world can discuss or like communicate with one another, whether it's through text, voice calls, etc. And like there are multiple platforms, whether it's Discord, YouTube, Instagram, Snapchat, and more.
Yeah, I think social media is really digital connection. It's a way for people to stay connected when they're not together.
I think it was certainly developed with the idea to keep in touch or broaden your horizons, like when it comes to businesses or like podcasts like this, we of course use social media. But I think in the media today, we hear a lot about the negatives of social media. So what could some of those be?
I would say one negative, maybe it could be probably addiction, because I feel like if you're like so attached to social media and like your life depends on it, like it can be like a negative influence on you. And if you're so dependent on social media, you may struggle with like real life interaction, which is critical.
That's a big negative effect of social media. Another one that I can think of is getting locked in your own echo chamber. So like on Twitter and like Instagram and stuff like that, if you only follow people who you agree with, it doesn't even have to be politically, just like in general. It can lock you into your idea of what life should be. And there's so much more than kind of what you're trapped into on any of these platforms. And opening yourself up to those other ideas allows you to grow more as a person, because you're not just one thing. You can be as many things as you want to be.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, because I think about how there's different algorithms. I think every platform has its own algorithm, and you can sort of create your own experience. And kind of like you said, where you're maybe, if you create your own experience enough, you're not really getting, this full like sort of worldview. You're creating your own sort of box of an experience online, which is pretty interesting. I hadn't really thought of that. That's a really good point.
I think another example of a negative effect that social media can bring is like the way you can compare yourself to others. Because as we said, it was like a social platform, so we're sharing media with each other. And I think like a lot of people, like myself included, you go online and you see these people doing great things, and you're just comparing yourself the whole time. Like this person is very young and they're out here being successful, or this person's is working out and getting their perfect body or whatever, and I'm here doing what I'm doing, right? And then when you compare yourself a lot, I think that really just has a negative effect on you, especially if you're doing it like all the time, like you're like every day you're on social media and you're always seeing people better than you, flexing on you, all these different things. So I think when it comes to that, you got to kind of know how to kind of focus on yourself, and in terms of like just comparing yourself to yourself like the day before pretty much, and not worry about everyone else, because yes, they're ahead of you, but they're also like, everyone's just on different levels, and that's okay. Maybe they had more resources, or maybe they started earlier than you, or maybe they're just talented, right? But again, like everyone's at their own level, and what someone else is at, it shouldn't like affect you. You just gotta focus on yourself.
I think that's a good point too. I think also when people post on social media, they often post what you call the highlight reel, right? They're not posting that they have, a sick parent, or that they're failing their math class, or you don't say that on social media. So you're comparing yourself to the shiniest and sometimes even most embellished parts of someone's life, right? So I think that's so important to remember with social media, is that, a lot of times people are just posting that best part, but everyone has their own experiences and challenges and struggles, and just because they don't post about it doesn't mean that it's not there. I think that is something that, is frequent with social media, seeing like influencers and they look so perfect, and, we see what they show us, right? But there's always, just with the human experience, there's more below the surface oftentimes.
Yeah, I think a lot of people like choose not to display that because like they might think it makes them feel, or makes them seem like weak to the outside, but making yourself online as real as possible is kind of the opposite. It makes you stronger as a person because people look at you and they say, oh, this person is doing great in one area of their life, but in their other life, maybe they're doing not so well, but they're brave enough to show that and show that they're working on it, which I think it could be a great part of social media. I don't think people use it like that as much as they should, but maybe like posting like progress so that people can see that you at one point were like at a lower level and have worked up to where you are, not just posting where you are.
And then there's the other thing to do, which is like just not necessarily use social media at all. You know, I think that's a great solution because, I mean, like if you're not like really trying to like use social media for like a productive purpose, then it just becomes like a time suck, right? And entertainment. And honestly, I would say that I think, like me personally, I would prefer other forms of entertainment. Like a TikTok is funny, but it's like you know, it's just like a really short thing. But you know, like something like a television show, I would rather spend my time. I feel like TikTok and other like social medias is kind of just like a time killer, you know. And I think it also kind of, I don't know, I see like people like it takes away from just daily life. Like I'm in a study hall, right? And then people, you know, they're just on their phones on social media scrolling, right? They could be talking with their friends. They could be getting some work done. So it also serves as a kind of like a distraction sometimes. So it might be best for some or even most people to just try to limit it as much as possible.
Contrary to that point, what could some of the positives be? One that immediately jumps out to me would be connection. Like a lot of people that maybe like left the school that we're at or like moved away or something like that, you don't come in contact with them in person, but online you can keep that relationship going, you can keep in touch, and you can really share ideas like we do this podcast. We wouldn't reach out to people like in other countries face to face. It has to happen online.
Yeah, there was actually one of our friends, Leon Sirota, if you remember him from like second grade or first grade. I actually saw him. I just looked his name up on Instagram, and I was able to reconnect with him. And yeah, it was pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I think everything you guys have said is so true. I think also, you know, the only social media that I use is Facebook, and I love it because I've had it since I was in high school, and for me, it's like almost like a scrapbook of my life. You know, I've watched my kids and gotten married, and like I can like look back on this day and see all these different things that I've done, and it really is kind of a cool way to be able to, you know, log on every day and say, oh yeah, like 8 years ago, here's where I was, or I totally forgot this funny thing that my kid said. I think another interesting thing too with social media is that really wasn't when I was growing up, but I see it a lot now, is the news. Like you get a lot of times your news on social media. You find out big world events that are happening through social media, which is really interesting.
Yeah, I think that's great that we have like that level of connection, but it could also be misused too, unfortunately. Mm-hmm. But if we're looking at the positives, I think it is nice that like we can get news that we might not have heard like on the TV or stuff like that. Just stories that you can read like in less than a minute that wouldn't come up like any other way than online.
Yeah, and I have a one final positive, which is like the ability to kind of like put yourself out there. You know what I mean? Like with this podcast, you know, we're able to share this with people like on YouTube. This is where we get a lot of our viewers because of social media, right? We're able to get people to see it. Also, if you have a business, TikTok is like really good for like natural growth. Like you don't have to like spend a lot of money to make TikToks. You just make a TikTok at home, and then if you have a chance to like go viral, I would say, you know, or get some views, and you don't have to pay for that, you know, because otherwise you have to advertise it. But you can kind of get some free kind of engagement, free views on your stuff and towards your business or whatever.
I agree. I think the most important part about using social media is the balance between the positives and the negatives. Like you can't have all the positives without the negatives. Kind of balancing that in your own life, whatever makes most sense for you in that given time. And also like trying to limit it if you notice that you're like spending too much time. Like Dale, like you said, is a time suck. So noticing that you got up at 9, sat on the couch and haven't done anything till 1 p.m, like a change has to be made there, and limiting social media can definitely help with that.
Yeah, I can actually talk about limiting social media. I used to use Instagram like all the time, like just like habitually. So what I did was I hid the app, so I still have it. I would just have to search for it. And what I found was that every time I would open my phone, my thumbs were clicking to the folder that Instagram used to be in, and it wasn't there, you know. So it was like a habit to, like, when I'm bored, to just go on Instagram. So I've been using it a lot less, and only when I need to like post something to like advertise for this podcast here, that is really when I use it. So yeah, that's one way you can do it.
I think if you guys remember a couple of years ago in our advisory class, we had done a lesson on social media. And I just remember one slide that was like every positive that you can find for social media, there's also like sort of an opposite negative, right? We talked about connection. It can be really positive to stay connected to people. It can also sort of disconnect us from the people around us, right? So it's exactly what you said, Liam, of making sure that we're balancing those positives and negatives, that we're not, wrapping up our worth in how many likes we're getting, but, also being proud to share who we are. It's sort of just, finding that healthy balance.
Yeah, it's definitely a tough game to play. I don't really think that there's anything in the past that's exactly like this. So we kind of have to look like to the future, and like in the present, we can't really look back and see like, oh, how did this happen in the past, or how did things similar to this like influence society? We kind of have to blindedly like explore for it ourselves. So I have a quote here from Amy Jo Martin, and she says, "Social media is a dialogue, not a monologue, and some people don't understand that. Social media is more like a telephone than a television." So what does that mean to you? What thoughts does that bring up? For me, I think she's speaking to Twitter and stuff like that, where you can like put comments on people's posts and stuff like that, because a lot of people use that as kind of like every thought they have in a day, they just write it down, and they might not be they might not be things that are meant to be written down. Like if you're thinking like, oh, my boss sucks, you shouldn't be writing that down because someone else can see that. But we've kind of like taken our brains and put it in this rectangle in our hands, and just take everything out of our brain and put it on that every second of the day. And I don't think it's supposed to be used like that.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of just like reminds me of what we said before, like finding that balance. And in this case, it's like not necessarily a balance of usage, but balance of what you're willing to share, what you're not willing to share, and what things you want to talk about and not want to talk about. Because obviously you got to stay safe, and you got to stay, respectful of all that.
Yeah, social media, like anybody could see it. So like I think it's very important to be like careful about what you put out there. Like, for example, if you're at a job and say maybe you work at Walmart, you don't want to like say something like negative about Walmart, because like the company themselves, they can like look at your social media and see that, you're not really like a loyal employee, or you're not like a positive influence on the company. So they could like maybe like fire you or give you any like consequence. So like you want to avoid like any like negative influence that social media can give you, and like putting like negative thoughts out there, especially about like a job, like that can bring forth negative consequences.
Yeah, and it's actually really interesting too with what you were saying, Cafe, how, even, you think about the very obvious, like don't like you said, say I hate my boss or something like that. Yeah. But even like, it's crazy, even beyond that, like I've heard stories about people who like didn't get a job or got in trouble because of something that they liked on social media, like even like an article or like a fan page or something. Like this country is very, it's maybe in a period of growth, we can say right now, right? Everyone's a lot of politics and division and things like that. And I think you have to be really careful what you say on social media too, because, it can come into your life in ways that you don't even expect it to, which is really interesting.
Yeah, social media definitely gives people power, and it's kind of up to the individual to use that accordingly, whether they want to spread positivity or put out their business or leave mean comments on other people's posts. Unfortunately, that's kind of how it's used. So after our discussion today, we learned some of the positives and negatives of social media, how we can limit it in our own lives, and how we can look to find that balance within our own life. Thank you for listening. Make sure to subscribe to this podcast on your platform of choice so you don't miss any new episodes. I'm Liam.
I'm Cafe.
I'm Dale.
Miss Brown.
And this is Get Well Soon.